The man stood at the entrance to the kitchen, his heart hammering irregularly as he heard his wife's voice slicing through the air with sharp words. In the corner, hunched over the sink, his father tried to make himself smaller, invisible, as if apologizing for breathing. Outside, the afternoon was dying slowly, but in here, something was about to break forever. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The afternoon sun spilled slowly across the street as the man parked the car in front of his own house, still carrying the metallic tang of the airport and the bone-deep weariness from endless meetings. He'd arrived earlier than expected, almost on impulse, wanting nothing more than to be back in the home that had become his only refuge. However, even before he reached the side door, he noticed the silence had an unusual density, as if the house itself were holding its breath. It was a silence that didn't match the way his father usually filled the rooms with the small sounds of routine, shuffling footsteps, the quiet clink of a spoon against a coffee cup, the simple care of someone who was grateful for every gesture, even those no one noticed. When he stepped inside, his footsteps were swallowed by the cold tile floor, and something inside him immediately tensed. The air felt heavy, far from any welcoming familiarity. He wanted to announce he was back, but the voice he heard before he could call out completely derailed his train of thought. It was his wife's voice, but not the voice he knew. There was a hardness to it, an irritation laced with contempt, as if she was speaking to someone who deserved to be put in their place. And then there was another sound, a fragile whispered reply that made his blood run cold. His father apologizing. His father trying to explain something simple with embarrassment, as if he had committed a huge offense for simply making coffee. The man froze unintentionally behind the wooden room divider, as if his body knew this moment demanded absolute silence. He heard his wife speaking with the firmness of someone bothered by the presence of a person who was supposed to be invisible. He heard his father trying to shrink even further, retreating like someone trying to fit into an ever smaller space. And as he witnessed this, unseen, he realized this scene wasn't new. There were little details scattered across his recent memory, silverware that would go missing, glasses that moved from their usual spot, conversations that stopped abruptly when he walked in, a strange exhaustion in his father's movements, as if he were always asking for permission, even just to exist. He decided to go back to the front entrance, coming in loudly in an instinctive attempt to rewrite the moment. He watched his wife's expression change in an instant, as if slipping on a completely new face, one that was affectionate and gentle, as she led his father to the living room with a rehearsed delicacy. His father's confused gaze, caught between relief and fear, tormented the man's heart more than any words ever could. That abrupt contrast between the cruelty of moments before and the sudden kindness in his presence planted a heavy doubt in his mind, one that began to blossom in silence. In the following days, the house began to reveal small cracks, like a structure that had always been, flawed, but which he had never paid enough attention to notice. Staff seemed hesitant when he asked if everything was okay. The housekeeper would avert her gaze, as if carrying secrets she was afraid to bring to light. On his father's things, there were signs of hasty use, as if he always had to put everything away before someone saw. One day, he found a saucepan hidden in the back of a cabinet, still with traces of the coffee his father liked to make, and he realized that this simple habit had been slowly suppressed, replaced by a rigidity that didn't belong in a home. It was then that the man began to watch more closely, noticing that his father seemed to measure his own steps, as if counting each movement so as not to bother anyone nearby. His hands trembled when he held objects, not just from age, but from something that felt like fear. And his smile, so familiar, had become shorter, more discreet, as if carrying a guilt he should never have to bear. The man started to feel the weight of his own distraction. He felt he had been absent for too long, that he had let his home life run on an autopilot he now realized was deceptive. Searching for answers, he reviewed old recordings from the security cameras. At first, he saw only routine, but as he fast-forwarded, he found scenes that stole his breath. His father recoiling after being verbally shoved away from the kitchen, his father cowering before disproportionate scoldings, small humiliations disguised as household instructions. There were no screams, no physical assaults, but they were silent, deep, almost invisible blows, the kind of wounds that pride tries to hide, and the messages he found on his wife's phone showed a growing discontent, expressed in sarcastic remarks and bitter comments about having her father-in-law around. There was a pattern of irritation, of camouflaged impatience that he had never imagined. When he decided to confront his father with what he had seen, he found him in the backyard, calmly folding an old towel in that meticulous way that had always characterized him. Upon hearing his son's question, he answered with an almost disconcerting serenity, saying that everything was fine, that he didn't need to worry, that his wife was just stressed, that it wasn't worth fighting over silly things. And behind that calm was a silent plea for his son not to get hurt trying to protect him. His father had always been like that, someone who would rather diminish himself than cause trouble. He preferred to stay silent rather than ignite conflicts that might destabilize his son. A few more days passed, and the man began to realize that his father's presence in his own home had become almost ghostly. He walked too slowly, spoke too softly, and avoided lingering in rooms as if he were occupying a space that didn't belong to him. The man started observing his wife through a new lens, noticing how she would look away when his father entered the room, how her posture would change, how a certain annoyance appeared in her smallest gestures, until, in a tense conversation, something broke. His wife stated that she couldn't go on living like this, that she couldn't stand living with someone who disrupted her routine, her events, her needs. And when she referred to her father-in-law as a burden, the man felt something inside him shatter. The conversation escalated like a silent fire. The wife justified herself with arguments about organization, aesthetics, and privacy. He tried to understand how he had never noticed any of this before. She insisted that his father's presence made everything more difficult, and finally, in a moment, heavy with wounded pride and impatience, she delivered the ultimatum that changed the course of their lives. "It's either him or me." The words echoed in the man's mind, almost unreal, as if his home were being subjected to a silent test he had never imagined he would face. When he found his father folding clothes into an old suitcase, he realized the old man had already made his decision. He said he was leaving so he wouldn't be a bother to his son, that he didn't want to be the cause of pain or separation. It was living proof of a love so selfless it was painful to watch. The man placed his hand on the suitcase, understanding that this gesture wasn't just an attempt to leave. It was an act of protection, a silent sacrifice, and there, in that instant, he realized the real choice wasn't between two people, but between two paths, the path of convenience and the path of dignity. From that point on, the house began to change, though the outcome was far from being revealed. The man realized that some decisions require courage, others require loss, and some simply require the ability to see the one who was always there without asking for anything in return. And as he tried to pick up the pieces of this newfound truth, the future of the house, of his father, his wife, and himself, hung fragilely like something about to be transformed forever. That night, the man couldn't sleep. He lay beside his wife, separated from her by a distance, measured not in inches, but in entire worlds. He listened to her breathing, calm and steady, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just pitted a father against a son, a family against its very essence. He turned on his side, staring at the dark ceiling, trying to find some answer there that made sense. But the ceiling remained silent, indifferent, just as everything in that house seemed to be becoming. He remembered being a child, and his father coming home from work with calloused hands, smelling of oil and sweat, but always with a smile saved just for him. He remembered the nights they sat on the porch, counting stars and making up stories about constellations that didn't exist. His father never had much money, could never give him luxuries, but he was always present. He was always the first one up to make breakfast before school, the last one to sleep after checking that all the doors were locked. He was a simple man, of slow gestures and few words, but every gesture carried a weight of love that needed no explanation. And now that same man was on the other side of the wall, packing his bags in silence, willing to disappear from his own son's life so as not to be a nuisance. The injustice of it all burned inside the man's chest like a live coal. How had they gotten to this point? When had he allowed life to become so twisted, so wrong? The next day he tried to talk to his wife again. He chose a moment when they were alone in the kitchen, she making juice while he pretended to read the paper. He started carefully, trying not to sound accusatory, but firm enough to make his feelings clear. "We need to talk about my dad," he said, and saw her stiffen immediately as if she already knew where this was going. "This again?" she replied, without taking her eyes off the oranges she was cutting. "It's not this again. It's something we've never really talked about. You know he has nowhere else to go. You know he always helped me when I needed it. You know that." "I know," she cut him off, and this time she looked at him, and there was something in her eyes he no longer recognized. "I know all of that. But you also know I didn't get married to share my house with your father. I married you. We had plans. Remember? Plans that didn't include having an old man living here, messing with my things, getting in the way when we have guests." "Getting in the way?" he repeated, the words feeling like a slap. "He barely leaves his room. He goes out of his way not to bother anyone." "Exactly," she said, and there was a calculated coldness in her tone. "He stays in that little room like a ghost, and yet I feel his presence all the time. I can't relax in my own home. I can't have my friends over without feeling embarrassed to explain why there's an old man living here." "Embarrassed?" His voice came out louder than he intended. "You're embarrassed of him?" She sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a stubborn child. "It's not embarrassment. It's discomfort. It's the feeling that my life isn't my own, that I always have to adapt, always have to give up space. And honestly, I'm tired of it. I deserve a life without these complications." He watched her in silence, realizing he was facing a version of her that had perhaps always been there, but that he had never wanted to see. He had married this woman thinking they shared the same values, the same priorities, but now he saw they had just been happy coincidences while life was easy. When hardship knocked on the door, or rather, when hardship was already inside the house, quiet and humble, the true values of each of them appeared like stains on a wall that had always been there, just waiting for the right light to be seen. "And what do you want me to do?" he asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "You know what I want. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. There are places for this, facilities. Your father could be well taken care of, have the company of people his own age. It might even be better for him than being here, alone all day waiting for you to come home from work." Facilities. The word sounded like a sentence. He thought of his father, who was terrified of hospitals, of enclosed spaces full of strangers. He thought of how the old man clung to simple objects, to the mug he used every day, to the worn-out blanket he'd brought from his old home. He thought of what it would be like to tear him from that small universe he had left and throw him into a place where he would be just another number, another anonymous old man waiting for the days to pass. "No," he said, and the word came out with a firmness that surprised even himself. "I'm not going to do that to him." She dropped the knife on the cutting board with force. "So you're choosing him over me? Is that it?" "I'm not choosing anyone. I'm refusing to abandon my father because he's become inconvenient for you." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with everything that wasn't being said. She looked at him as if she were seeing a stranger, and maybe she was. Maybe they were both revealing themselves for the first time in all the years they had been together. She left the kitchen without another word, and he stood there, holding the newspaper he hadn't read a single line of, feeling the weight of a decision he still didn't know how to make. That afternoon, he found his father in the backyard, tending to the plants. The old man had a way with the earth, even without ever having had a real garden. There, in that forgotten corner of the yard, he grew tomato plants and herbs, simple things that didn't need much. The man approached slowly, watching the wrinkled hands work the soil with a gentle touch. "Dad," he called, and the old man looked up, wiping his hands on his worn apron. "Hey, son, everything okay?" "I should be asking you that." The father gave a small, crooked smile. "Oh, I'm fine. Always have been." But his eyes said something else. There was a weariness there that went beyond the physical, a kind of exhaustion that came from within, from carrying a burden alone that was too heavy for one man's shoulders. "You don't have to lie to me," the man said, crouching down beside him. "I saw. I know how she treats you when I'm not here." The father looked down as if ashamed of being found out. "She's just stressed. A young woman full of energy. It's not easy for her to have an old guy like me around." "Don't talk like that. You're not a burden. You're my father." "I know, son, but I also know things aren't simple. Your marriage is new. You're still building your life together. And I've lived my life. I don't want to be the reason you and your wife fight." "You're not the reason for anything," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're here because I wanted you here, because you deserve it, because after everything you did for me, it's the least I can do." The father placed his hand on his son's, squeezing gently. "I know you feel that way, and I thank you for it every day. But I also know I can't stand between you two. I've thought about it, you know. There are places, homes for people my age. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's time for me to go my own way." "No," the man said, with a resolve that came from some deep place he didn't even know he had. "I'm not letting you go to one of those places. You're staying here. This is your home, as much as it is mine." The father smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of the painful wisdom that only comes from a long life. "Sometimes, son, you have to pick your battles, and I don't want you to lose your family because of me." "You are my family," the man replied, and he hugged his father right there in the middle of the yard, smelling the scent of earth and sweat and time that clung to that tired body. But as he held his father, he also felt the weight of the choice he would have to make, because deep down, he knew he couldn't have both, not the way things were. And with each passing day, the house grew smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls were slowly closing in, pushing them all toward an inevitable confrontation. He didn't know yet what he would do, but he knew something had to change, and when that change came, nothing would ever be the same again. The following days seemed to drag on like open wounds. The house, once a refuge, had become a kind of minefield where every step had to be calculated, every word weighed before being spoken. The man would wake up early and go straight to work, come home late and lock himself in his office, avoiding his wife's glares, avoiding the conversations that led nowhere. His father remained in his corner, increasingly invisible, as if he were practicing for the day he would finally disappear. One afternoon, returning early from the office, the man witnessed a scene that would be etched into his memory like a scar. He came in through the back door and heard voices from the laundry room. He approached quietly and saw his wife talking to the housekeeper, Amelia, an older woman who had worked for them for years. "I can't take it anymore, Amelia," his wife was saying, in that tone of intimate complaint. "It's like having a shadow following you all the time. I wake up and he's already awake. I go to bed and he's still there fiddling with something. I have no privacy in my own home." Amelia remained silent, folding clothes with mechanical movements, but the man saw the discomfort on her face. "You don't think I'm overreacting, do you?" his wife continued, as if seeking validation. "Any woman in my place would do the same thing. I didn't marry him to be an old man's babysitter." "Mrs. Laura," Amelia said, her tired voice choosing words carefully, "Mr. Anthony is a good man. I've never seen him harm a soul. He's just old, tired. He needs a place to rest." "A place, yes, but not here, not in my house." The man felt anger rise like bile. He backed away before they saw him, but those words echoed in his head for the rest of the day. "Not in my house." As if the house didn't also belong to his father, as if the old man had no right to be there, as if love and family were matters of convenience. That night at dinner, the tension was so palpable it felt like a third person at the table. His father ate in silence, chewing slowly, as if not wanting to make too much noise. His wife picked at her food, her face set in a mask of poorly disguised irritation. The man tried to maintain some semblance of normality, but every attempt at conversation died in the air before it could take flight. "Are the beans good, Dad?" he asked, just to break the silence. "They're great, son. Amelia is a wonderful cook." "I made them," his wife said flatly. "Oh, I'm sorry," his father hurried to say. "They're delicious, very tasty indeed." She didn't reply. She just kept pushing the food around on her plate, as if she were alone at the table. The man looked at her, then at his father, and felt a profound sadness. How had they come to this? When had the woman who claimed to love him become incapable of showing a shred of kindness to his father? After dinner, while his father washed the dishes, he insisted on it, saying he needed to feel useful. The man followed his wife to their bedroom. He closed the door behind him and found her sitting on the bed, removing her earrings with sharp, jerky movements. "We need to solve this," he said. "There's nothing to solve. You know what I want. The question is, what are you going to do?" "I'm not abandoning my dad, Laura. That's not up for discussion." She laughed, but it was a humorless cutting sound, like broken glass. "So you've chosen. Perfect. Now I'll choose too." "What are you trying to say?" She faced him with a firmness that bordered on cruelty. "I'm saying if he stays, I go. It's that simple. You can stay here with your father, playing the dutiful son, while I go live my life far away from this situation." "You're not serious." "I've never been more serious in my life. I'm not going to spend the next years of my life sharing my space with an old man who is not my responsibility. You have to choose. It's either your father or it's me." The ultimatum hung in the air like toxic smoke. The man looked at the woman he had married, searching for any trace of the person he once loved, but found only a stranger wearing a familiar face. "You know he has nowhere else to go," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You know he was always good to me, that he always helped me. How can you ask this of me? I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. There are nursing homes, specialized facilities. He could be fine there. Maybe even better than here, with people his own age, activities, professional care. He doesn't want to go to one of those places. He wants to be with his family." "Then he should find another family," she shot back, and the words fell like stones. "Because I didn't sign up for this when I married you." The man felt something break inside him. It wasn't anger, not a sadness. It was a kind of painful clarity, like when a blindfold falls away and you finally see what was always there, waiting to be discovered. He left the room without another word and went to the backyard. He needed air, space, a place where he could think without feeling the walls closing in. He found his father sitting on the wooden bench, looking up at the starry sky. "Everything okay, son?" the old man asked, without taking his eyes off the stars. "No, Dad, it's not okay." His father nodded as if he already knew. "She wants me to leave, doesn't she?" The man sat down beside him, feeling the weight of that question. "She wants a lot of things, but what she wants doesn't matter more than what's right." "And what's right, in your opinion?" "What's right is you staying here. What's right is us being a real family, not just when it's convenient." The father smiled sadly. "You know, son, when your mother was alive, she always said you see true love in the hard times. Anyone can love when everything's easy, when everything's beautiful. But real love shows up when things get tough, when you have to choose between comfort and what's right." "Do you think I don't love her?" "I think you love the idea of her. But the real person, maybe you never truly knew her." The words hurt because they carried a truth the man had been avoiding. He had married her in a whirlwind of passion, enchanted by Laura's beauty and charm, but he had never tested that love in difficult situations. They had never been through a real crisis, through moments that required sacrifice. And now, at the first real test, she was failing, or maybe he was the one failing, for expecting something from her that she had never promised to give. "What do I do, Dad?" The old man put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You do what your heart tells you, but whatever your choice is, it has to be one you can live with. Because the decisions we make, son, they stay with us for the rest of our lives. Can you live with yourself knowing you sent me away to please her? Can you look at yourself in the mirror after that? No. Then you already have your answer." But knowing the answer didn't make the choice any easier, because choosing his father meant losing his wife. It meant admitting his marriage was over, that those years together hadn't been enough to build a bond strong enough to survive a crisis. And there was a pain in that, a sense of failure that weighed like a stone. They sat there in silence, father and son, looking at the stars that witnessed their quiet drama, indifferent as they have always witnessed human dramas since the beginning of time. And as they sat there, the man thought of all the choices that had brought him to this moment, of all the times he had closed his eyes to small cruelties, to little signs that Laura wasn't who he thought she was. He remembered when he brought his father to live with them, right after his mother passed away. Laura had agreed, but with reservations. She had made it clear that his father should stay in the back room, that he shouldn't be too visible when they had guests, that he needed to respect their space. At the time, he thought they were just normal concerns for someone sharing a home. Now he saw they were signs of something much deeper, an inability to see his father as a person, as family, as someone who deserved dignity, and he realized, with a clarity that hurt, that he had failed his father long before this crisis. He had failed every time he agreed to Laura's absurd rules. He had failed every time he pretended not to see his father's discomfort. He had failed by choosing superficial peace over fighting for what was right, but he wouldn't fail anymore, no matter the cost. "Dad," he said, his voice firm now, cleansed of doubt, "you're staying, no matter what happens. You're staying." His father hugged him, and in that embrace there was gratitude, relief, and also sadness for everything this decision would cost his son, because they both knew the price would be high. But some prices have to be paid, some battles have to be fought, even when you already know it's going to hurt. The morning arrived as mornings do after sleepless nights, dragging, heavy, filled with a light that hurt the eyes. The man woke up on the living room sofa, where he had finally fallen asleep after hours of thinking. His body ached, his neck was stiff, but none of it mattered compared to the weight on his chest. He heard a noise coming from the bedroom, hurried footsteps, drawers being opened and slammed shut. He got up and went there, finding Laura stuffing a suitcase with clothes, tossing everything in carelessly, like someone trying to flee a burning building. "What are you doing?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. She didn't even look at him. "What does it look like I'm doing? I'm leaving. I'm going to my sister's." "Laura, no," she cut him off, turning to face him. "Don't start. I warned you. I told you what would happen if you chose him, and you did. So now you deal with it. I didn't choose him. I chose to do what's right." She laughed, a joyless, bitter sound. "Do what's right. You chose to put an old man who doesn't even appreciate what you do for him ahead of the woman who shares your life. That's not right. That's stupid. He's my father, and I'm your wife, or I was, because after today, I don't know what we are anymore." The silence that fell between them was thick, filled with everything that hadn't been said. Over the months, perhaps years, how many times had he swallowed his discomfort to keep the peace? How many times had he pretended not to see her small cruelties because it was easier than confronting her? And now here he was, watching his marriage crumble like a house of cards that had always been too fragile to stand. "You can go," he said, his voice steadier than he expected, "but I'm not going to beg you to stay, not if you can't understand why I can't abandon my father." She stopped packing and looked at him with an expression that mixed disbelief and anger. "You're really going to let me go, just like that, without a fight?" "Fight for what, Laura? For you to stay here and make me choose between you and my dad every day? For us to keep living in this house like strangers, with you treating him like he's a stray dog someone left on our doorstep? I never treated him badly." "Yes, you did. I saw it. I heard it. And worse, I pretended I didn't because it was more comfortable that way. But I see it now, and I can't pretend anymore." She snapped, the suitcase shut. "You're going to regret this. You'll be here with your father, the two of you all alone, and you'll realize what you lost." "Maybe," he admitted, "but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." Laura grabbed her suitcase and walked past him without a backward glance. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close, heard the car start and drive away. And when the silence returned, it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't a silence of anticipation, of tension. It was a silence of emptiness, of something that was over. He stood there in the empty bedroom, looking at the open drawers, the half-empty closet, all the signs of a departure that was probably final, and he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because the tension was gone. Sadness because a marriage had ended. Because the dreams he had built with Laura were all falling apart. He went downstairs slowly and found his father in the kitchen, making coffee. The old man looked at him with an expression of worry and guilt. "She's gone," the man said, before his father could ask. "Because of me?" "No, because of her. Because of who she is." His father poured 2 cups of coffee and they sat at the table, as they had done so many times before. But this time the silence between them was heavy with meaning. "I'm so sorry, son," his father said, tears in his eyes. "I never wanted to be the reason you two split up." "You weren't. The split was already there. We just hadn't noticed, or I hadn't wanted to notice. Still, you lost your wife because of me. I didn't lose anything worth keeping," the man said, and it was true, though it hurt to admit. "Someone who makes me choose between her and you isn't someone I want by my side." The father took a sip of his coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "So now what?" What are you going to do? I'm going to live. I'm going to work. I'm going to take care of you and me. I'm going to move on. Do you think she'll come back? The man thought for a moment before answering. I don't know, and honestly, I don't know if I want her to. Not with things the way they are. They spent the rest of the morning in silence, each lost in his own thoughts. The man went to his office and tried to work, but the words on the screen seemed meaningless, blurred by the confusion inside him. He picked up his phone several times, thinking of calling Laura, of trying one more conversation, of finding some middle ground. But he always put the phone down before dialing, because he knew there was no middle ground possible, not in this situation. That afternoon, he received a text from her. I'm staying at my sister's for a few days. We need to think calmly about what to do, but my position hasn't changed. It's him or me. The choice is yours. He read the message 3 times, searching for any sign of doubt, any opening. But there was none, just the ultimatum, as cold and final as a verdict. He typed and deleted several replies before finally writing, I've already made my choice. He sent it before he could change his mind and turned off his phone. He knew that message was a final stop, or at least a point that marked the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, the house seemed larger, emptier. His footsteps echoed differently in the halls. Meals were quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, without the tension they had been carrying. His father seemed more relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He went back to making breakfast, tending to his plants, occupying the house without fear. One night, as they were having dinner, his father remarked, The house is quieter without her. Yeah, it is. Lighter, too. The man nodded. It was true. The house was lighter. But his heart still carried the weight of failure, the feeling that he had failed at something important. He didn't regret the choice he made, but it hurt to think that his marriage hadn't been strong enough to survive such a basic test of humanity. Do you still love her? His father asked suddenly. The man was silent, thinking. Did he? Or had he loved the idea of her, the version she presented when everything was easy? I don't know, he answered honestly. I think I love the person I thought she was. But that person, I don't think she ever really existed. Sometimes we fall in love with the mask, his father said, with the tired wisdom of someone who has lived a long time. And when the mask comes off, you have to decide if you can love the face that was underneath. And can you? Depends on the face. Depends on what you see there. The man thought of Laura's face without the mask. He thought of the coldness, the lack of empathy, the inability to see his father as someone who deserved dignity, and he realized that no, he couldn't love that, because that wasn't love, it was convenience disguised as affection. Another week passed. Laura didn't get in touch, he didn't reach out either, and slowly he began to accept that this was probably the end, that the marriage had reached the point of no return. And while it hurt, there was also a certain peace in it. The peace of knowing he had made the right choice, even if it was the hard one. One afternoon, Amelia came to talk to him. She said Laura had called, asking if he was okay, if he had changed his mind. And what did you say? He asked. I said you were doing fine, that you seemed more peaceful even, and that your father was doing better too. And her? She hung up. The man nodded. There was nothing more to be said. Laura's silence was more eloquent than any words. She wasn't coming back, not while his father was there. And his father was staying, so that was it. The marriage was over. That night, he sat in the backyard with his father, looking at the stars as they had so many times. And though the future was uncertain, though he didn't know what lay ahead, he felt a strange sense of peace, the peace of someone who did the right thing, even when the right thing hurts, the peace of someone who chose dignity over convenience. and for now that had to be enough. The weeks that followed brought a new routine, different but strangely comforting. The man would wake up early and find his father already in the kitchen, preparing coffee with the care of someone who turns simple gestures into a ritual. They would have coffee together, talk about small things, the weather, the news, the day's plans, and in this there was a peace he hadn't felt in months. At work, his colleagues noticed the change. They asked if everything was okay, if something had happened. He would say yes, that he was just going through some personal changes. He didn't go into detail. There was no need. This was between him and his father. No one else needed to understand. But the nights were hard. Alone in the room he once shared with Laura, he felt the weight of her absence. It wasn't exactly longing, but more a strange sense of loss, of something that ended before it had the chance to become all it could have been. He found himself thinking about things that could have been different, if he had noticed sooner, if he had talked more, if he had set boundaries from the beginning. But if changed nothing. What was done was done. One night, as he lay in bed trying to sleep, he heard a light knock on the door. It was his father in his pajamas, with a worried expression. "Everything okay, son? I saw the light on." "Just thinking." His father came in and sat on the edge of the bed, just as he used to when the man was a child, and had nightmares. Thinking about her. A little, thinking about everything, really. "Want to talk?" The man sat up, leaning against the headboard. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Not in choosing you," he quickly clarified, "but in how I handled it all. If I should have tried harder, talked better, found some way to make it work." His father was silent for a moment before answering. "Son, some things just can't be made to work, no matter how hard you try. Because for it to work, both people have to want the same thing, and when one wants one thing and the other wants something else and neither can compromise, no amount of talking can fix that." "But what if I had compromised? What if I had agreed to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "To send me away," his father completed without bitterness. "Could you have lived with that?" "No." "Then there's no point in thinking about what if. You did what you had to do, what your heart told you to do, and that's no small thing." "But it hurts." "Doing the right thing usually hurts. If it were easy, everyone would do it." They sat there in the silence, father and son, sharing a moment of understanding that needed no words. After a while, his father stood up, placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and left, leaving him alone with his thoughts. But this time, the thoughts were lighter, because his father was right. He had done what his heart told him to do, and if that meant sleeping alone for a while, so be it. At least he slept with a clear conscience. The months passed. Laura sent divorce papers. He signed them without argument, without trying to negotiate. He divided everything. Fairly, kept the house because she didn't want it and moved on. There was no bitterness, just a kind of resigned sadness, like someone saying goodbye to something that was once important but couldn't survive. During this time, his relationship with his father deepened in unexpected ways. They started cooking together on weekends, his father teaching him old recipes he had learned from the man's mother. They fixed up the backyard together, planting more things, creating a small but beautiful garden. They returned to their old habit of sitting on the porch at night, talking about everything and nothing. And in these conversations, the man discovered things about his father he had never known. Stories of a difficult childhood, of the struggles to raise a son alone after his wife died, of the fear he always had of not being good enough, of failing as a father, of the nights he cried alone, wondering if he was doing the right thing. "I never knew that," the man said one night, after his father told him about working 3 jobs at once to pay for his school. "I never wanted you to know. I didn't want you to feel guilty or think I was making a sacrifice. For me, it wasn't a sacrifice, it was love. I never thanked you enough. Son, you don't need to thank me. Seeing the man you've become is thanks enough. But I failed. My marriage is over. You didn't fail, his father interrupted firmly. You stayed true to what you believe in. That's not failing. That's having character. The man felt his eyes burn. How many times had he needed to hear that? How many times had he needed his father's validation to feel less guilty? Thanks, Dad. Don't mention it. It's the truth. And believe me, you'll find someone who sees that, someone who understands that family isn't a burden, it's a gift. I don't know if I want to look, not right now. You don't have to. Let life bring her to you when the time is right. And the man believed him, because his father had that quiet wisdom of someone who has lived long enough to know that things happen in their own time, not ours. One day, a few months after the separation, he received a message from Laura. She said she was engaged, that she had met someone who understood her needs, and that she wished him and his father the best. There was no malice in the message, just a final farewell. He read it, reread it, and felt nothing but a slight sense of relief. Relief that she had moved on, relief that he no longer had to carry the guilt of having ruined her life. She was fine, he was fine, and they had each gone their own way. He showed the message to his father. "So, how do you feel?" the old man asked. "Fine. Strange, but fine. It's like closing a book you stopped reading a long time ago." That's a good way to put it. "And you? How do you feel?" His father thought before answering. "I feel like things worked out the way they were supposed to. She wasn't the one for you, son. At least not in the long run. Better to find out now than 10, 20 years from now." "That's true." That night, the man deleted Laura's number from his phone. Not out of anger, but out of a sense of closure, of truly turning the page. And when he slept soundly, without bad dreams, without haunting thoughts. At work, things improved too. Without the tension at home, he could focus better, be more productive. He received a promotion, a recognition he had been chasing for years. When he told his father, the old man cried with pride. "Your mother would be so proud," he said, wiping his eyes. "You think so?" "I'm sure of it. She always said you'd go far. And look at you. She was right." That night, they celebrated with a simple dinner, just the two of them. In the kitchen, they had learned to share as partners, not as host and guest, and there was something profoundly comforting in that, in the simplicity, in the authenticity of that moment. But not everything was perfect. His father was getting older. He tired more quickly, forgot small things, moved more slowly. The man noticed these changes with a tightness in his heart, knowing that time was relentless, that one day this man would no longer be there. And that made him cherish every moment, every breakfast, every conversation on the porch, every story his father told, because he knew it was all on loan, that nothing lasts forever. One afternoon, he came home from work and found his father asleep in his chair, a book open on his lap. He stood there watching, feeling a mix of love and fear. Love for everything this man represented, fear of losing him. As if sensing his gaze, his father woke up. "Hey, son, what time is it?" "Late. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, just dozed off for a bit." "Dad, if you're not feeling well..." "I'm fine, son, just old. And old people get tired." The man smiled, but the tightness in his chest remained. That night, after dinner, as they washed the dishes together, his father said something that echoed in the man's mind for days. "You know, son, I'm not afraid of dying. I've lived a good life. I've seen you grow up, become a man, make hard choices, and make them with dignity. My only fear was dying knowing I had been a burden to you, but now I know I'm not, and that gives me peace." The man stopped washing the plate he was holding and hugged his father right there in front of the sink, not caring that their hands were wet and soapy. He held on and didn't let go, because he knew that hug was more than a hug. It was a promise that no matter what happened, he would be there. Always. And his father hugged back tightly, as if making a silent promise of his own, a promise that this love, this bond, was stronger than any challenge. It was the kind of thing that survives everything, even time. It was on an ordinary morning, with nothing special about it, that everything changed. The man woke to a strange silence in the house, not the peaceful silence he had grown accustomed to, but a different kind, heavy with something he couldn't name. He got up and went to the kitchen. The coffee wasn't made, the table was empty, and his father, who always woke up before him, was nowhere to be found. He found him still in his room, lying down, his face pale and his breathing shallow. "Dad? Dad? What is it?" "I'm fine, son. Just not feeling too well today. Think I caught a cold." But it wasn't a cold. The man knew it from the way his father clutched his chest, from a pallor that was beyond normal. He called the doctor, then an ambulance, and within hours they were at the hospital, his father on a gurney, connected to machines that beeped in a rhythm that made the man's heart race. The doctors spoke in technical terms: heart failure, arrhythmia, the need for hospitalization. They talked about care, treatment, and recovery time, but in their eyes the man saw what they weren't saying, that his father was old, that his heart was tired, that things weren't as simple as fixing him up and sending him home anymore. He spent the next few days at the hospital, sitting by his father's bed, watching him sleep, watching him wake up confused by all the tubes and wires. His father tried to joke, to say he was fine, that this was all an overreaction, but they both knew it wasn't. "You should go home," his father said one afternoon. "Get some rest, take a shower." "I don't want to leave." "Son, you need to take care of yourself too." "I'm fine right here." His father smiled weakly, squeezing his son's hand. "Stubborn. You were always stubborn. I learned from the best." They sat in silence, hands intertwined, listening to the constant beeping of the heart monitor, and in that silence was everything they needed to say, everything they had always known, but never needed to voice. One night, when his father was finally sleeping soundly from the medication, the man went for a walk down the hospital corridors. He saw other families, other silent dramas unfolding behind each door. Old people like his father, sick young people, children fighting for one more day of life. And he realized how fragile life is, how everything can change in an instant. He thought of Laura, of how she had worried so much about small things, the appearance of the house, what other people would think, fleeting conveniences. And now, there in that hospital hallway, all of it seemed so absurdly irrelevant. When he returned to the room, he found his father awake, looking out the window. "Can't sleep?" he asked, "just thinking." "About what?" His father turned his head to look at him. "About everything. Life. Choices. The time that's passed." The man pulled his chair closer to the bed. "And what do you think about it all?" "That it was worth it. That if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Maybe I would have hugged you more when you were a kid. Maybe I would have said I love you more often. But overall, I did the best I could. And I think it was enough." "It was more than enough, Dad." "You think so?" "I know so." His father sighed, relaxing against the pillow. "I just wish I had more time. Time to see you happy again. Time to meet the grandchildren you're still going to give me. Time to sit on that porch, counting stars." "You will have that time," the man said, though he wasn't sure. "You're going. To get better, you'll come home and we'll have plenty of time." But his father just smiled in that way that means, "I know you're lying to make me feel better, but I accept the lie because I know it comes from a place of love. In the days that followed, his father's condition slowly improved. He was able to sit up, eat without help, and take a few steps around the room. The doctors were optimistic, talking about discharge, about going home with some extra care. And the man felt hope rekindle within him. But when he finally brought his father back home, he realized something had changed. The old man was more fragile, more tired, as if those days in the hospital had stolen a part of the energy he still had. He walked more slowly, spoke more softly, and slept more. The man adapted the house. He put a bed on the ground floor so his father wouldn't have to climb stairs. He hired a nurse to come a few times a week to help with medication and exercises. He reduced his workload so he could spend more time at home. And in this process, he realized something he should have realized sooner, that time is the most precious commodity we have, that it's pointless to have success, money, or recognition if you have no one to share it with, if you don't have the simple moments that make life worthwhile. One afternoon they were sitting on the porch, the one his father loved so much, when the old man said, "You know what I like most about this porch?" "What?" "That from here I can see the horizon, see the sunset, see life happening out there. It reminds me that the world keeps spinning, that life goes on even when we think it has stopped. It is beautiful out here. It's not just the view, it's the feeling. It's sitting here with you, with no rush, with nowhere else to be. It's knowing I'm exactly where I need to be." The man looked at his father, saw the deep wrinkles, the completely white hair, the trembling hands, and he also saw the peace in those eyes, a peace that came from knowing he was loved, that he was important, that he had made a difference. "Dad, I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For taking so long to make the right choice, for letting you go through all that with Laura, for not realizing how things were sooner." His father shook his head. "You don't need to apologize. Sometimes we need to see things one way before we can see them another. And you saw. When it mattered, you saw. And that's what counts. But you suffered." "I suffered a little, it's true. But look where we are now. Look at this peace. It was worth it to get here." They sat there until the sun set completely, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, as if nature wanted to remind them that even at the end of the day, there can be beauty. That night, as he helped his father get ready for bed, the old man held his hand. "Son, I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone," and he raised a hand when the man tried to protest. "No, let me speak. When I'm gone, I want you not to feel guilty. I want you to live. To find someone who makes you truly happy, to build a family that understands what family means. And I want you to remember that I died happy. I died knowing I was loved. I died in peace." "Dad, promise me." The man swallowed the lump in his throat. "I promise." His father smiled and closed his eyes, looking more peaceful than he had in days. And the man sat there beside the bed, watching his father's chest rise and fall in a steady rhythm, thinking of all the promises we make, all the vows we keep. He thought about how strange it was to promise something you hope you never have to fulfill. But he promised, because it was what his father needed to hear, because it was the least he could do. In the following months, they developed a new routine. The man worked from home whenever possible, staying close. They had lunch together, watched old movies his father liked, and talked about everything and nothing. And every day was a gift, every moment a victory against the time that insisted on passing. His father had good days and bad days. Days when he woke up cheerful, wanting to do things. Days when he could barely get out of bed. And the man learned to accept both, to be present for both, to make each day the best it could be. And on one of those afternoons, as his father slept in the rocking chair on the porch, the man looked at him and realized this was love. Not the romantic love from the movies, full of grand gestures and declarations. But true love, the kind that shows itself in daily care, in patience, in constant presence. The love that doesn't need words because it manifests in every action, in every choice, in every day you wake up and choose to stay, choose to care, choose to love. And in that moment he knew he had made the right choice. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only choice his conscience would allow, the only choice that let him sleep in peace, the only choice that made him the man his father had raised him to be. It was on one of those ordinary days, with nothing special about it, that life decided to surprise him. The man was at the grocery store, buying the things his father liked. That specific coffee, the bread he preferred, the fruits he could chew without difficulty. He was distracted, looking at the list on his phone, when he bumped into someone knocking a box of tea to the floor. "I'm so sorry," he said, bending down to pick it up. "No problem," a woman's voice replied, and when he looked up, he saw a woman in her early 30s, with brown hair in a messy ponytail and kind eyes. "I was distracted, really, I'm sorry." "It's okay," she smiled. "My head is always in the clouds, too." They held each other's gaze for a second longer than normal, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a genuine interest. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was something in the way she smiled, how she didn't make a big deal out of a small thing, how she seemed real. "Well, again, sorry for the trouble," he said, wanting to prolong the conversation but not knowing how. "No trouble at all," she said, picking up the box of tea and putting it in her cart. "By the way, this tea is great. My dad loves it." "Really? I was thinking of getting some for my dad too. He likes tea." "Then you should. It's worth it." And just like that, with a conversation about tea, it all began. There were no fireworks, no background music, just two strangers talking about something mundane in an ordinary grocery store. But sometimes that's how important things start. Without warning, without fanfare. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. But the man thought about that encounter all day. He couldn't get her smile out of his head, the simplicity of the conversation, how normal it had felt to talk to someone without any games or hidden agendas. 2 weeks later he saw her again, this time at a coffee shop near his work. She was alone reading a book, and he hesitated before approaching. "Hi," he said a bit awkwardly. "We bumped into each other at the grocery store a couple of weeks ago." She looked up and recognized him immediately. "Oh, the tea guy. Hi. Can I sit, or would you rather be alone? I don't want to interrupt." "No, please. I've read this chapter 3 times already. I think I need a break." He sat down, and they started talking. He learned her name was Marina, that she was a physical therapist, and that she lived nearby. She learned that he was a project manager, that he was recently divorced, and that he lived with his father. "Oh, that's so great that your dad lives with you," she said, and there was genuine admiration in her voice. "My dad lives with me too. I could never leave him on his own." "Really?" He felt a pang of hope, of connection. "Yeah, my mom passed away 2 years ago, and he was just lost. I brought him to live with me without a second thought. Some of my friends think I'm crazy, that I'm wasting my life, but you don't care what they think." "Exactly," she smiled. "He's my dad. He took care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn." The man felt something warm in his chest. Here was someone who got it. Someone who didn't see caring for a parent as a burden, but as a privilege. They talked for over an hour, and when they finally said goodbye, they exchanged numbers. It wasn't romantic, not laden with expectations. It was natural. It was right. In the following days, they texted. Small things. how their day was, a silly joke, a picture of something funny, and slowly they got to know each other better. Marina had a similar sense of humor. She liked old movies. She was a voracious reader. And most importantly, she had values that aligned with his. When he finally told his father about Marina, the old man was ecstatic. "She takes care of her father too?" "She does. Then she understands. She knows what's important." "I think so." "Do you like her?" The man thought before answering. "I think so. It's different. It's not like it was with Laura. It's calmer, more real. Real is good. Real lasts." A few weeks later, he invited Marina over for dinner. He was nervous, unsure how she and his father would get along, if it would be awkward, if it would work. But when Marina arrived, carrying flowers and a cake she had baked, all the tension vanished. She greeted his father with genuine warmth, sat with him, and they talked about plants. They discovered they both loved gardening. His father showed her the herbs he was growing, and Marina gave him tips on how to care for his tomato plants. The man just watched, feeling a peace he didn't know was possible. During dinner, Marina asked about their lives, their routine, and she did so with real interest, not the forced politeness of someone just trying to be nice. She really wanted to know. She really cared. When she left, his father grabbed his son's arm. "This one is different. I know. This one understands. I know. Don't let her get away." The man laughed. "I'm trying not to." In the weeks that followed, he and Marina started seeing each other more often. Sometimes it was just for coffee, sometimes a walk in the park. Other times she would come for dinner, and the three of them, he, Marina, and his father, would talk late into the night. On one of those nights, after his father had gone to bed, they sat on the porch, looking at the stars. "You know," Marina said, "I dated a guy before who thought I was crazy for living with my dad. He said I needed to live my own life, that I was sacrificing too much. We broke up because he just couldn't get it. I went through something similar." "You did?" "Your ex didn't approve. Not only did she not approve, she gave me an ultimatum. It was either my dad or her." "And you chose your dad?" "I did." Marina took his hand. "You're a good person. You know that, right?" "I just did what was right." "Exactly. And so many people don't. They choose the easy way, the more convenient path. But not you. You chose your father. You chose what was right, even knowing it would hurt. You would have done the same thing. I would have. But not everyone would." They sat there in silence, hands intertwined, and the man felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not just hope that he might be able to love again, but hope that this time it would be different, because Marina understood. Marina valued what he valued. Marina saw strength where Laura had seen weakness. As the months went on, their relationship deepened. Marina became a part of their routine. She helped care for his father when he was unwell. She stayed with him when the man had to travel for work. She brought her own father over to visit, and the two old men became friends, spending entire afternoons talking about the old days. And the man realized, with a profound sense of gratitude, that life has a way of working itself out. That when you make the right choices, even when they hurt, the universe has a way of rewarding you. Not always in the way you expect, not always when you want, but one way or another, things fall into place. One night after dinner, Marina helped his father to his room. The man watched the gentle way she treated him, the patience, the genuine affection. And when she came back to the living room, he pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being you, for understanding, for not making me choose." She hugged him back tightly. "You will never have to choose. Not with me. With you comes your father, and that's okay. That's how it should be." In that moment, the man knew. He knew he had found something real, something worthwhile. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was honest, it was kind, and it was built on values that mattered. And when he went to sleep that night, he slept with a peace he hadn't known in years. The peace of someone who knows he is exactly where he needs to be, with who he needs to be, with living the life he was always meant to live. His father had been right. Real lasts, and this, whatever he was building with Marina, was as real as it gets. Winter arrived gently, bringing cold mornings and lazy, sunny afternoons. The man's father was more fragile, sleeping more and eating less, but he still insisted on tending to his plants when the weather allowed. Marina had become a constant presence in the house, as natural as the furniture, as essential as the air. One afternoon, while his father dozed in the living room, Marina and the man were making dinner together. She was chopping vegetables with the precision of a seasoned cook, while he stirred a sauce on the stove. "I think my dad likes you more than he likes me," he joked. "Impossible," she laughed. "But we do get along, it's true. He reminds me of my dad, the same calm, the same kindness." "Do you think they know? Our dads, that we—" He trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. "That we're falling in love," she completed, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think so. I think they knew before we did." The man stopped stirring the sauce and looked at her. "So you feel it too?" "I do," she said, just like that. No drama, no frills, just the truth. "I don't know exactly when it started, but it's here, and it's real." He walked over and kissed her, right there in the kitchen, among the pots and pans and spices, and it was the most honest kiss he had ever given. There was nothing performative about it, nothing rehearsed. It was just true. When they pulled apart, they heard a little cough from the living room. His father was awake, smiling a mischievous smile. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, a twinkle in his eye, "but there's someone at the door." It was Marina's father, Charles, bringing a pie he had baked. They invited him to stay for dinner, and the evening turned into a small but meaningful celebration. 2 children, 2 fathers, sharing food and stories. The old men talked animatedly about the old days, comparing memories, laughing at things only those who have lived a long life can find funny. And the man and Marina watched, sometimes joining in, sometimes just savoring the moment of pure simplicity. "You two make a beautiful couple," Charles said suddenly, his tone full of approval. "Dad!" Marina blushed. "What? It's true. And what's more, you both know what matters. That's rare these days." The man's father nodded in agreement. "It is. My son had to learn the hard way, but he learned, and now he's found someone who already knew." "And my daughter went through something similar," Charles said. "A boyfriend who couldn't understand why she wouldn't just stick me in a home, as if it were that simple. As if family were disposable," his father added. "Exactly." The 4 of them sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, a silence filled with the truth that they were all there because they chose to be, because they valued the same things, because they understood that family isn't an obligation, but a daily choice. After Charles left, the man's father asked to speak with him and Marina alone. "I want to say something serious," he said, a solemnity in his voice that made the man's heart tighten. "Is everything okay, Dad? Are you feeling sick?" "No, it's not that. I'm fine, as much as I can be, but I wanted to say something to you both." They sat around him, listening intently. "I don't know how much time I have left," he began, and raised a hand when his son tried to protest. "No, let me finish. I'm old. I'm tired. And that's okay. I've lived a good life. I had a wonderful son. I saw him become a man of character, and now, in these last few months, I've had the joy of seeing him find someone who deserves him, someone who understands what's important." Marina took the old man's hand, squeezing it affectionately. "Mr. Anthony, Let me finish, he smiled. I wanted to ask something of you. When I'm no longer here, I want you two to take care of each other. I want you to build a real family based on what matters. And I want you, if God allows, to have children and teach them what you know. That family isn't about blood. It's about presence. It's about choosing to stay when things get hard. The man felt hot tears stream down his face. Dad, you're going to be here for a long time. You're still going to meet our children. Maybe not. But either way, I need to say this. I need you to know that I'll die happy. I'll die knowing I left a legacy, not of money, not of possessions, but of values, of love, of dignity. Marina was crying now too, and the three of them embraced there, in that simple living room, sealing a wordless promise. In the weeks that followed, his father slowly declined, not dramatically but gradually, like a candle burning down. He had days when he was fine, cheerful, wanting to talk. Others when he could barely get out of bed. Marina began to spend more time with them, helping, with his care. She would bring her father along, and the two old men would spend hours talking, as if trying to soak up every moment, aware that their time was borrowed. One night, after Marina and Charles had gone home, his father called to his son. "Son, sit here." The man sat on the edge of the bed. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, Dad?" "For choosing me. For doing the right thing when it would have been easier to do the wrong thing. For giving me dignity when so many people would have sent me away. I would never have done that, I know. And that's why I'm proud of you. You're better than I could have ever hoped for. I am who I am because of you. You taught me everything that matters." The father smiled, tired but at peace. "Then I did my job. I raised a good man. There's no greater legacy than that." They talked late into the night, about everything and nothing, about old memories and future hopes. And when his father finally fell asleep, the man sat there watching, committing every detail of that beloved face to memory, as if he knew the days were numbered. And he did know, deep down he always had, but knowing didn't make it easier. It only made it more urgent to love, more important to be present, more vital to say everything that needed to be said. A few days later, Marina and he were talking about the future. She had gently suggested that maybe they could think about moving in together, about truly joining their families, her, him, and both their fathers. "Would that be crazy?" she asked. "Two couples, 4 people, all in one house?" "It would be different," he smiled. "But I don't see why it wouldn't work. We get along, our dads get along, and it would be good for them too to have each other for company. Do you think your dad would be up for it?" "Let's ask him." When they proposed the idea, the man's father was moved. "You would do that? You would set up a home with us in mind too?" "Of course, Dad. We want to build a real family. And family includes you." "And you, Charles?" Marina looked at her own father. "What do you think?" Charles, who was visiting that day, grinned widely. "I think it would be a blessing to live surrounded by people who care, who look out for each other. What more could an old man ask for?" And so it was decided. They started looking for a bigger house, a place that could comfortably accommodate everyone. They planned for ground-floor bedrooms for the fathers, common spaces where they could all be together, and a large garden where they could plant things together. The man's father followed the plans with enthusiasm, offering suggestions, imagining what it would be like, but they all knew there was a chance. He wouldn't live to see that house finished, and that made every conversation more precious, every plan more meaningful. One afternoon, as they were looking at pictures of potential houses, his father said, "Even if I don't make it there, I want you to go ahead with it. I want you to build this family, to be happy. You're going to make it there, Dad. You'll see us tending the garden. You'll have coffee in the backyard. Maybe not. But the important thing is that the dream lives on, that you continue to believe in family, in care, in love. And the man promised, because it was all he could do, promised that the legacy would continue, that the values would not die, that everything his father taught him would be passed on. That night, after everyone was asleep, he stood on the porch, looking at the stars, as he always did with his father, and he felt a deep gratitude. Gratitude for having had the courage to make the right choice. Gratitude for finding Marina. Gratitude for every day he still had with his father. And he promised himself he wouldn't waste a single moment, that he would live each day with intention, with presence, with love, because that's what matters in the end. Not what you have, not what you accomplish, but how you love, how you care, how you choose every single day to do what's right, even when what's right hurts. And as the stars shone on, indifferent from above, the man knew he had learned the most important lesson of all, that life is made of choices, and in the end, the only choices that matter are the ones made with the heart. Spring arrived shyly, painting the world in new colors. The house they had bought was almost ready, a spacious place with a large garden and 2 ground-floor bedrooms specially adapted for their fathers. The man's father followed the renovations with a quiet joy, like someone who doesn't want to get his hopes up but can't hide his optimism. It was on a Saturday morning, with the sun streaming through the windows and birds singing outside, that the man woke with a strange feeling. He got up and went to his father's room. He found him awake, looking out the window with a serene expression he had never seen before. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, son. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it?" "It is. It's lovely out there. Want me to help you get to the backyard? You could get some sun." His father shook his head slowly. "I think I'll stay here today. I'm tired, you know. But it's a good kind of tired. The kind you feel after a lifetime of work, when you can finally rest." The man sat on the edge of the bed, holding his father's hand. "Should I call the nurse?" "No need. It's nothing she can fix. It's just time, son. It's just time doing what it does to everyone." They sat there in silence for a while. Outside, life went on. Cars passed, neighbors chatted, the world turned. But inside, in that room, time seemed to have stopped, as if wanting to give them a few more moments, a few more words. "I wanted to tell you something," his father said, his voice weak but firm. "Go on, Dad." "I'm not afraid. I have no regrets. I lived well, I loved much, and I was loved in return. Few people have that privilege, you know, to reach the end knowing it was all worth it." "Don't talk like that, Dad. You still—" "Son," his grip was gentle but final, "we don't have to pretend. I know, you know, it's okay. It's natural. It's the cycle." The man felt the inevitable hot tears begin to fall. "I don't know what I'll do without you. It'll be hard at first, but you'll be okay. You have Marina now. You have a family to build. You have dreams to chase, and I'll be there somehow. In the choices you make, in the values you carry, in the moments you choose what's right over what's easy. You taught me everything. Then use what you've learned. Live well, love well, be for your children what I tried to be for you. I promise." His father smiled. A smile of peace, of someone who has reached the end of the journey and can look back without remorse. "Could you call Marina? I'd like to speak with her too." The man called, and Marina arrived in less than 20 minutes, bringing her father with her. When they entered the room, they immediately sensed this was a special moment, one of those moments life gives us to prepare for the inevitable. The man's father took Marina's hand. "Thank you for taking care of him, for understanding, for being the person you are. Mr. Anthony, you don't have to thank me. It's a privilege to be here. Take good care of him when I'm gone. Remind him to laugh, to live, not to get lost in his work. And when you have children, tell them about the old man who chose love over convenience." Marina was crying openly now. "I will, I promise." He turned to Charles. "And you, my friend. Thank you for the talks, the laughs, for the afternoons we spent together. You made these last few months lighter. The pleasure was all mine, Anthony. You're a good man, an example." The father nodded, tired. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, something was different. An acceptance, a peaceful surrender. "I think I'll rest a little now," he said, his voice growing fainter. "Do you want us to stay?" his son asked. "I do." And so they stayed. The four of them, there in that simple little room, witnessing the end of a life lived with dignity. There were no beeping machines, no medical urgency, just a peaceful passing, surrounded by love. His father slept and his sleep grew deeper, his breathing more spaced out. The man held his hand the entire time, whispering words of love, of gratitude, of farewell. And as the sun began to set, painting the room gold, his father took his last breath. It was gentle, almost imperceptible, like someone who simply decided it was time to go. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with all that had been lived, all that had been loved. The man hugged his father's still warm body, feeling the weight of the loss, but also the lightness of knowing he had done everything right, that he had been there, that he had chosen to stay. Marina embraced him from behind, crying with him for the man she had barely known but already loved like family. And Charles placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, a silent solidarity from someone who understands the pain of losing a father. They stayed there for a time they couldn't measure, letting the grief come, letting the tears flow, letting the mourning begin its necessary work. The days that followed were a blur of wakes, funerals, and condolences. People the man barely knew came to say that his father was a good man, that he always helped when he could, that he would be missed. And every word was a testament to a life well lived. At the funeral, the man spoke about his father. He spoke of the lessons he learned, the love he received, the choice he had to make, and why he never regretted it. And when he finished, he saw many people crying, many nodding their heads in understanding. Amelia, the housekeeper, approached him afterward. "Your father was a special man, and so are you. Few would have done what you did. I just did what was right." "Exactly, and that's why you're special." The weeks passed. The house grew quieter, emptier. His father's room remained untouched for a while. The man couldn't bring himself to go through his things yet. But slowly, with Marina's help, he began to organize everything, donating what could be useful to others, keeping the memories he wanted to preserve. They found a small notebook where his father had written down his thoughts. The last entry read, "My son chose dignity, he chose love, he chose right, I die happy." The man read it while sitting on the floor of the empty room, and he cried as he hadn't cried since the day of the funeral. But they were tears of gratitude too. Gratitude for having had that man as his father. Gratitude for having made the right choice when it mattered. 3 months after his father's death, he and Marina were married. It was a small, intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and Charles. And though his father wasn't there physically, his presence was felt in every detail, in the flowers that had been his favorite, in the music he loved. In the words the man spoke in his vows. "My father taught me that family is about choices," he said, looking into Marina's eyes. "It's about choosing to stay when things get hard. It's about choosing to love when love demands sacrifice. And I choose you, today and always." Marina smiled through her tears. "And I choose you, your family, your values, everything you are and everything you will become." They moved into the new house. The room that had been planned for the man's father became an office, but they kept the plants he had started to cultivate. The garden thrived, blossoming, as if it carried the old man's essence. A year later, Marina was pregnant. When their son was born, a boy with light eyes and a strong cry, there was no question about his name. Anthony. in honor of the grandfather he would never meet, but whose legacy he would carry. And as he held his son in his arms for the first time, the man whispered a promise. "I'm going to teach you everything my father taught me, about dignity, about love, about doing the right thing even when it hurts. You will know your grandfather. Through stories, through values, through the way we live." Marina, lying in the hospital bed, smiled. He would have loved to meet his grandson so much. "He knows," the man said, and he believed it. Somehow, he knows, and he's proud. The years passed. Little Anthony grew up hearing stories about the grandfather who shared his name. He grew up understanding that family isn't just about blood, it's about presence, that what's right isn't always what's easy, but it's always worth it. Charles continued to live with them, helping to raise his grandson, being the present grandfather figure that the man's father couldn't be. And there was a poetry in that, a cycle completing itself in a different but beautiful way. One evening, years later, the man was on the porch, the same porch where he had so often sat with his father. Little Anthony, now 5 years old, sat beside him. "Daddy, tell me the story about Grandpa Anthony again." And he told him. He told him about a good man who taught what matters, about a hard choice that changed everything, about a love that doesn't give up, even when it would be easier to let go. And as he told the story, he looked up at the stars, the same stars that had witnessed so many conversations with his father. And he felt a deep peace, the peace of someone who honored a promise, of someone who lived the values he was taught, of someone who passed on a legacy not measured in money or possessions, but in character and love. Marina joined them, bringing hot chocolate. Charles came too, sitting in the rocking chair. And there they sat, 4 generations in spirit. The grandfather who was gone but lived on in stories, the father who learned and now teaches, the son who learns and will one day pass it on, and the great-grandfather who witnesses it all with quiet wisdom. And in that moment, the man understood completely. His father was right. He hadn't left an inheritance of money, but he had left something far more valuable. He had left an example. He had left values. He had left a son who knew what matters, and that legacy, that was eternal. Life went on, with its challenges, its joys, its losses and gains, but always, always guided by the values his father taught, by the dignity he chose, by the love that doesn't quit. And when the man grew old, when his own hair turned white and his hands trembled, he looked back with no regrets. He had lived well. He had loved well. He had made the right choices, even when they hurt. And if one day his own son found himself at a similar crossroads, he knew he would make the right choice too, because that's what they had learned. That's what they carried. That was the legacy, not of gold, not of silver, but of something far more precious, the ability to love with dignity, to choose what's right over what's easy, to be family truly every single day. And that the man discovered as he looked at his own family gathered on the porch on an ordinary spring afternoon. That was everything. It was enough. It was complete. It was perfect. It was love. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like these deserve to be remembered.